How's everybody doing? Well, here we have another one again. And this one is Pluto in Taurus. Now, again, understand that between from Aries to Cancer, 5 degrees Cancer in 23 minutes, Pluto was outside of human consciousness because we did not know of its existence, of their existence, right? Of its existence until 1930. That doesn't mean that the planet Pluto was not causing its influence. It was. It always has. As Uranus and Neptune, the three transcendental planets, they have influenced humanity, shape and scope and molding and advancement and evolution of not only our solar system, our planet, but every single living species on our planet, affecting all 5 kingdoms. So Pluto in Taurus is something like Pluto in Scorpio that we know nothing about. We don't know anything about Pluto in Scorpio, or Pluto in Capricorn, or Pluto in Pisces, Pluto in Aquarius, Pluto in Sagittarius. Pluto entered Sagittarius in 1994 for the first time in 248 years. We have no idea and no written documentation of how Pluto in Sagittarius operates. The astrologers that taught me back when I was a teenager, there was nothing written, and the very few that was written was scant references. Some of it was right, some of it was not so right. It took experience and analysis and observation over decades to see how these signs were affected by Pluto in them. Since there was nothing written about them, there was no reference point that we could use to gauge the evolution of Pluto in these signs, or what it even meant to have Pluto in these signs. We just didn't. Luckily, though, 50 years later, know what to tell you about Pluto in Taurus, in Gemini, in Cancer, in Pisces, in Scorpio, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Sagittarius. I have traveled the world, like I said, for a very long time since I was 10 years old. I've observed human nature and cultures and races throughout the world for all of my life. I have Mars in Sagittarius. I'm the consummate traveler and educator and philosopher. So, learning astrology from different systems from across different cultures and races, I've been able to reach a synthesis of how this planet, or all of the transcendental planets, function in the individual birth chart. Thank God, though, for the trailblazing discoveries done by cosmologists, not by astrologers, but by cosmologists. They don't give us credit, but at least we have the nobility and dignity to give cosmology its rightful due respect. Thank God for their diligent scientific methods. They were able to discover these planets, for astrologers to then be able to categorize them esoterically in their proper placement and sign assignments and rulership. Okay? Pluto in Taurus takes us back to the age of the Paleolithic period. If you talk to a historian or an anthropologist, a cultural anthropologist, he would tell you or she that we had the Neolithic period and the Paleolithic period. Well, Pluto in Taurus represents the Paleolithic period around the revolution of many Tauruses around the zodiac. Okay, Pluto in Taurus. Oh, sensual. That's why I'm just like this. It's all about body, sensuality. You can get better than this. You cannot get any better than this. This is Taurus. The opposite polarity being Scorpio. Mm. Fruity. At the beat. El Vacilo. My Lilith is in Taurus. And I'm a Virgo with my Decan in Taurus. So I understand the power of the physical body and the physical sensuality that the body can meet. And how can that can drive men and women crazy? Taurus, according to Ptolemy, which was the 26, which was the was ruled in the 26th dynasty of Egypt, said that there were two constellations that were considered the constellations of terror. The constellation of terror, according to Ptolemy, of the 26th dynasty of Egypt, mentioned Taurus, the constellation of Taurus, to be a constellation of terror, with Aldebaran, the red glowing star, sitting at the horn of the Taurus, illuminating the dark and red fiery globe of Lucifer. Pluto in Taurus. The other constellation that Ptolemy mentioned as the second most terrifying constellation, the constellation of terror, was the constellation of Scorpio, with Antares being the red star that sits at the tail of the scorpion. The opposite polarity, Taurus, Pluto, and Taurus. Both have the stars that emit great terror, written by all of the ancients throughout the Paleolithic period, the age of Taurus. Ja, 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 para, wala, para, husan, ja, ja, ja. Ah, Taurus rules sensuality, sexuality, the beauty of the physical body, the fixed earth, the footstool in which we stand. Pluto in Taurus. So, Pluto in Taurus represents the deep rhythm and biorhythms and sensations of the flesh. The smell of a man's sweat, his pheromones, the sweat in between his balls, then underneath his armpits, the sweat that can drive women crazy. Women can sweat and come on themselves just by the smell of a man. There are women that cannot stand the smell of a man because it drives them crazy. Not that much like animals do with each other when they be smelling each other's butts. You know, women go crazy over a man's scent, especially if it's musty, and so do get men too. The pheromones that a physical body can emit is extremely powerful. A woman's sexual fluids have a certain smell that can drive men crazy. That alone can give a boner. Okay? A woman's, I guess, red carpet, like they say, her pubic hair, the smell of her armpits, the smell of her hair, the smell of her breath can drive a woman crazy. And if she's menstruating, mmm. I know I'm wicked, right? But that's Pluto in Taurus. It's wicked, wicked, pulling from the opposite polarity of Scorpio, the sign that deals with sex, while the opposite polarity of that sexuality is sensuality, which is Taurus. Barry White, think of Barry White and his voice. Teddy Pendergrass. No, some of these men have voices that can make a woman just wet themselves. That's the power of the voice. Taurus. Right here, the throat chakra. Pluto in Taurus. Cha cha cha. Ay, hasta que no puedo más. Cha cha cha. Okay? So, let's go back to the global and anthropological view of Pluto in Taurus. Let's go back to the Paleolithic period, which is the Stone Age, where life was determined by stone, granite, uh, um, limestone. You know, the pyramids were built in the age of Taurus. No, the Earth, the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, all of that falls under the age of Taurus, which lasts 2,500 years. Okay? The historical figures that come to mind when we're dealing with the age of Taurus, in which Pluto heralds, is Moses, the Ten Commandments. Moses! Moses! Moses was said to be a Taurus. He heralded the Taurian age, just like Jesus Christ heralded the Piscean age. There's always a leader that heralds the age, and in the Taurian age, it was Moses. Pluto in Taurus. It was a magical period, pulling from the opposite polarity of Scorpio. There was great magic in Egypt. The Pharaoh threw his staff, and there were two snakes that appeared. And Moses threw his staff, and it turned into a serpent, and he ate the other two snakes. Moses turned the river into blood, just like Jesus did, turn the river into wine. Do you see the correlation? Ah, Pluto in Taurus. It was a magical period in those days. Magic abounded in Egypt. Magic was a way of life. By then, the archons were in full swing. The archons, which we have to deal with today, were released in the age of Atlantis, the age of Aries, and they took hold of humanity and the planet by the time Pluto entered Taurus. And magic, particularly black magic, was a way of life back in the age of Taurus, pulling from the opposite polarity of the witch and the sorcerer, Scorpio. Ah, Tito Rodriguez, well, okay. Mm, delicious. If I said when the fruit ferments, pop out. Okay, so it was a magical period. Pluto in Taurus, if you know the story of the Ten Commandments, Moses relied on God to deliver the Jews, the Israelites, from bondage from Egypt. And there were plagues, there were death foams, there was a fire that light the path for the Israelites at night, and a great cloud that led them in the day. There were extraterrestrials in those days. guiding humanity towards its evolutionary advancement, moving humanity forward from the Paleolithic Stone Age into the New Age that will herald when Gemini enters the scene, as we talk later with Pluto, the Tower of Babel. Pluto in Gemini and Taurus. We'll talk about Gemini in the next video. The age of the Tower of Babel, where men went from speaking one language to multiple languages, not understanding each other. That was the age of Gemini, Pluto in Gemini. But we'll talk about that in the next video. So, having said all of that, that sounds wonderful and entertaining. But what does that have to do with the expression of that energy? A transpersonal energy, which is Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune, into the confines of the human ego and personality. Well, astrologers in my day, again, discouraged us from doing professional interpretation using the transcendental planets in the personal horoscope. But the only reason why they recommended that was because the astrologers in those days, and when I was growing up, really did not have a reference point, and these planets were newly discovered. We didn't know much about them, and not much was written about them. Maybe conjectures here and there, we went with mythology, scant, but nothing really concrete, especially nothing clinical that can be used as in applied astrology or esoteric astrology. That came with people like me, astrologers that were born in my generation. It was our job and responsibility to ascribe meaning and definition to these transcendental planets as it pertains to the individual expression of personality and ego in the individual horoscope. So we are now able to award you that information where it was not awarded to us. We had to learn from trial and error and great research, and of course some freebies given to us by the archons. Pluto in Taurus, or Pluto in the second house. And Pluto in the second house functions quite differently than Pluto in Taurus. But there are similarities. And again, many astrologers back in my day were discouraged from discussing the placement of Pluto in the signs. We were encouraged to focus on Pluto in the houses. But I'm a very different astrologer, as you all know by now. I focus on the sign and the houses. They're both equally important, but quite complex to understand and interpret. It really takes an astrologer of a certain age, over 50, like myself, to be able to give you a professional delineation of these planets as it pertains to the human ego and personality. Not so much because of the information awarded to us, which really isn't much, but because of the experience of having dealing with the human experience and the human condition. That awards us a certain window of how these planets can be used transpersonally in the individual horoscope. When we're dealing with Taurus and we're dealing with Pluto in Taurus, fundamental basics, food, shelter, and procreation. The three model that correlates with Taurus is good food, good sex, and good company. So when you have Pluto in Taurus, you could have uh, an overindulgence or an overabundance of these three principles. And the Roman Empire, there was a vomit room where Romans would eat, and then go and vomit, and then go back and eat more, and then they go back to this room and they vomit just to go back and eat more and more. That's Pluto in Taurus. Good food, good sex, and good company. And we see this debauchery in the Roman Empire when women and men will have sex with each other, women with women, men with men, women and children, men with little boys, and even bestiality. Remember Caligula having sex with horses and sex with animals. This is Pluto in Taurus. Sex gone perverse and wicked, pulling from the opposite polarity of Scorpio. This is what led to the fall of the Roman Empire. Is rich perverted debauchery, and misuse of sexual energy and principles. Pluto in Taurus. The beat. Oh, you gotta dance. I had to do that. This is about Taurus and Pluto. Sensuality, moving the hips and gyrating the hips. It was the age of pure sensuality and wicked decadence. So that means that that age was a wicked age. Wicked. But that was at the lower revolution. And higher revolutions, it will be much greater than that. But we haven't reached there yet. We're just moving out of that revolution into another revolution. We haven't yet completed the wheel. So, there's nobody born in the United States or in the world that has this signature of Pluto in Taurus. No. So, there's no one born with Pluto in Aries. There is no one born on the planet with Pluto in Taurus. There is no one born with Pluto in Gemini or Pluto in Cancer, the baby boomers. But we really see it with Pluto in Leo. The record begins with Pluto in Leo, Pluto in Virgo, Pluto in Libra, Pluto in Scorpio, Pluto in Sagittarius. We have nothing of Pluto in Capricorn, Pluto in Aquarius, or Pluto in Pisces. I could not do a professional birth chart with these placements because it doesn't exist. But Pluto falls in the 11th house, or in the 12th house, or third, second, first. So I have to discuss the energy of that planet as far as the epoch and the ages in the epochs for you to have an idea of how it might translate into the human ego and personality. Because as above, so below. Which is why I describe Pluto in Taurus, even though I know that there's nobody with that signature. But you do have Pluto in the second house, which would belong to Taurus. So I'm giving you a clue as to how it may relate also to the houses. So understand that with Pluto in Taurus, there was tremendous debauchery, excess, the five senses, the sense of touch, the sense of taste, the sense of touch, and hearing. The five senses were on maximum overdrive with Pluto in Taurus. There was so much adultery and debauchery in the Old Testament. If you live by the sword, you die by the sword. You know, people were stoned to death. The capital punishment in those days was stoning to death. This also correlates to the age of Taurus. In the age of Aries, the capital punishment was being pinned to a cross. That's very symbolic of Aries and also Pisces, which correlate with each other, the Alpha and the Omega. With Taurus, it wasn't being hung on the cross, it was being stoned to death. That's how you know that you were dealing with the age of Taurus. So, stone is hard and stubborn and harsh, pretty much like the psychology of Taurus. But Pluto in the second house embodies the metamorphosis of self worth and self esteem. If you got Pluto in the second house, you're here to transcend your self esteem and your self worth. Love yourself, value yourself, be higher. Barbara Streisand, who was criticized in the 1980s by overcharging in her concerts, had Pluto in the second house of Taurus. And she herself was a Taurus. And that woman deserved everything she deserved because that's what she felt she was worth. Pluto in the second house of Taurus. Guys, donate. Thank you.